Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In a large modern city where glittering skyscrapers stand, there is the Royal Palace Hotel, a luxurious establishment frequented by the world's elite. Every detail exudes wealth: Italian marble floors, crystal chandeliers, impeccably uniformed staff. But behind these prestigious exteriors, some employees sometimes let their prejudices speak. That day, a black man in his 50s, Mr. James Anderson, elegant in his sober suit, walks calmly towards the entrance of the hotel. With a careful look, he observes the facade that he knows so well, because he has not only visited this palace, he is also the owner. But what the guard on duty that day is completely unaware of is the true identity of the man he is about to humiliate. In an arrogant tone, with a mocking smile, the guard says, "Hey you! This isn't for people like you. You dirty black man, go to the zoo instead of hanging around here." The sentence cracks like a whip. The surrounding guests freeze, some shocked, others embarrassed. James, however, remains impressively calm. Behind his silence lies an unshakable dignity, and a revelation that will soon shake the entire hotel. Hallelujah! Royal Palace Hotel shone like a jewel that morning. Large crystal chandeliers diffused a golden light, caressing the white marble columns. Receptionists in navy blue uniforms greeted guests with smiles, while a sweet scent of orchids floated in the air. It was one of the most prestigious hotels in the country, a place reserved for influential politicians, renowned artists, and multimillionaire businessmen. At the entrance, a guard named Richard Doyle monitored the comings and goings. Tall, lean, with a tight jaw, he was known for his vigilance, but also for his cold temperament. His colleagues knew he could be authoritarian, sometimes even brutal in his judgments. That day, he was all the more nervous because the hotel was expecting a visit from a mysterious investor, a man whose name was carefully kept secret by management. It was then that a black man in his 50s, wearing a perfectly tailored gray suit, calmly approached the entrance. His appearance was discreet but elegant: polished leather shoes, a simple but refined watch, and a confident gait. His deep brown eyes observed every detail of the building with a certain intensity, almost as if the place belonged to him. The guard immediately frowned. In his mind, a customer of that skin color, with such a confident air, had no place in this temple of luxury. Prejudice spoke faster than reason. He stepped forward sharply, blocking the entrance. "Hey you, what do you think you're doing here?" Richard said in a harsh voice. The man stopped, his gaze fixed on him with astonishing calm. He didn't answer, waiting for him to continue. Richard looked him up and down, gave a contemptuous smile, and added sarcastically, "This isn't a place to hang out. This isn't your neighborhood, you understand? If you want to see beasts like you, go to the zoo. Dirty black guy." The words fell like a slap in the face into the silence of the lobby. A woman at the reception desk widened her eyes in shock. A couple of tourists looked away, uncomfortable. But no one dared to intervene. The man, however, remained perfectly still. His face showed neither anger nor sadness, only icy dignity. After a long silence, he said in a calm, almost gentle voice, "Interesting, very interesting." Then he gave a slight, almost imperceptible smile and calmly closed the distance between him and the guard. Richard, surprised by such confidence, instinctively took a step back. The man continued, still calmly, "We will soon see who is in the right place, and who is not." Without another word, he turned away and entered the lobby, under the intrigued gaze of the customers. Richard stood there, his jaw clenched, convinced he had just warded off an intruder. What he didn't know yet was that he had just humiliated James Anderson, the owner of the Royal Palace himself. And that his gesture would soon send trembling through the entire hotel team. James Anderson walked calmly through the vast hall of the Royal Palace. Every detail of this place reminded him of years of hard work, sleepless nights, and sacrifices. Yet today, he wasn't here to admire his work. He had come evaluate staff, incognito, before announcing a major international expansion of its hotel chain. Behind the white marble counter, Emily Carter, the head receptionist, stood straight. She was a young woman in her 30s, ambitious, always impeccable in her navy blue suit. When she saw James approaching, she immediately felt uneasy. She had seen the scene at the entrance. She had heard Richard's words, and a cold shame had passed through her. James stopped in front of the counter. His calm but penetrating gaze fell on Emily, who forced a smile. "Welcome to the Royal Palace, sir. Do you have a reservation?" she asked in a professional, though slightly shaky, voice. James held her gaze for a moment, then replied softly. "Not exactly, let's just say I came to check if everything is going well here." Emily blinked in confusion. This enigmatic answer unnerved her. She glanced discreetly at Richard, who was frowning at the doorway, clearly annoyed that the intruder had dared to enter. "Check," Emily repeated uncertainly. James gave a small smile. "Yes. You know, a hotel of this standing must welcome each person with respect, without distinction. The welcome says a lot about the hotel." Emily felt her cheeks heat up. Her hands were shaking slightly under the counter. She realized he was referring to what had just happened at the entrance, and it made her terribly uncomfortable. To mask her confusion, she took a more formal tone. "I understand, sir. But may I have your name so I can assist you?" James stared at her for a moment, then replied calmly. "Anderson. James Anderson." At this, Emily blanched. Her eyes widened. She knew that name. Everyone on staff knew that the hotel's owner, a wealthy but discreet man, was called that. She had seen his photo once, in an internal article, but hadn't really paid it any attention. Today, she had no doubt, it was definitely him. Her heart raced. She stammered. You're Mr. Anderson? The owner?" James tilted his head slightly, confirming with a simple smile. The silence in the lobby grew heavy. A few customers, who had stopped, were watching the scene curiously. In the background, Richard, the guard, hadn't heard the conversation, but he saw Emily turn pale and knew something serious was going on. James continued, still in a calm but sharp tone. "I heard some unacceptable things at the entrance to MY Hotel. And I think we're going to have a serious conversation about how some employees treat customers, or rather, human beings." Emily looked down in shame. She knew that Richard's fate, and perhaps her own, would be decided in the next few minutes. James then slowly turned towards the door, where Richard continued to stare at him arrogantly, still unaware that he had just sealed his own fate. Richard, the guard, stood at the entrance with his arms crossed, convinced that he had done the right thing by putting an intruder in his place. He didn't understand why Emily seemed so nervous. Seeing James turn to him, he raised his chin defiantly, ready to repeat his contemptuous words in front of everyone. James walked slowly towards him. Each step echoed through the silent lobby, announcing an impending truth. Patrons began to stop, curious, some discreetly taking out their phones to film the scene. Arriving in front of Richard, James stared at him calmly, his hands crossed behind his back. "Tell me, sir, how do you usually welcome guests at this hotel?" Richard shrugged arrogantly. "I welcome good customers, those who belong to this world. But the others? I make them understand that they are not welcome." A murmur ran through the lobby. Emily, at the reception desk, briefly closed her eyes, already terrified by the turn of events. James tilted his head slightly, like a patient teacher facing an ignorant student. "Interesting. And who do you think decides who belongs in this world, and who doesn't?" Richard smirked. "Me, of course. It's my job to filter out the undesirables. Look at you, dressed like you are, maybe you think you're putting on an act, but to me, you're just an imposter." The silence grew heavy. The customers whispered, shocked by such audacity. Some had already figured out who James was, others awaited the revelation with palpable tension. James took a deep breath, then said in a firm voice that echoed throughout the hall. "I'm going to teach you something today, Mr. Doyle. In a hotel, It's not the caretaker who decides who belongs in this world, but the owner. And this hotel, the Royal Palace. He paused, searching Richard's incredulous eyes. Belongs to me. A gasp of shock ran through the crowd. Emily covered her mouth with a hand. The customers exchanged glances, some already filming the scene. Richard, however, remained frozen, pale, unable to react. His lips parted, but no sound came out. His certainties had just collapsed in an instant. James continued, still in a calm but implacable voice. When you insulted me, you didn't just disrespect a man. You disrespected every black customer, every human being you encounter. And that, in MY establishment, is unforgivable. A thunderous murmur echoed through the lobby. An American couple clapped timidly, quickly followed by other customers who supported James. Richard finally looked down, his face red with shame, feeling the weight of all the eyes on him. James then turned to Emily, still upset behind her counter. Please notify the general manager immediately. We will resolve this matter in front of all staff. Emily nodded, her voice trembling, knowing that this moment would go down in the history of the Royal Palace. James, meanwhile, stood motionless, watching Richard, whose arrogance had evaporated, replaced by an icy fear. This was just the beginning. A few minutes later, the hotel lobby was buzzing. The news had spread like wildfire. The owner of the Royal Palace was there, and he had been insulted by a mere guard. The employees were running around, some nervous, others curious. Under the direct orders of James Anderson, all staff were summoned to the large conference room adjoining the lobby. Customers, intrigued by the commotion, continued to whisper among themselves, some still discreetly filming. In the conference room, a long, solid wood table sat in the center. Managers, receptionists, waiters, and even cleaning staff were all sitting and standing around, worried. The atmosphere was tense, with everyone wondering what was going to happen next. Richard entered last, head bowed, forced to sit opposite James, who was standing at the front of the room. His calm imposed silence. James looked around the room. His voice rang out clear and firm. Today I came unannounced. Not to inspect the walls or the chandeliers, but to inspect what matters most in this hotel, respect. A religious silence fell over the room. James continued. Upon entering my own establishment, I was greeted with words I will never forget. Words that should never come from the mouth of an employee who claims to represent this palace. I was told, and I quote, "Dirty black man, go to the zoo." A shudder ran through the room. Several employees exchanged shocked glances. Emily, sitting in the front row, clutched her trembling hands. James looked directly at Richard, who shrank in his chair. This man, whom you see here, believed he could decide who had the right to pass through these gates. But he forgot one essential thing: these gates belong to those who have the dignity to cross them, and not to his prejudices. The Director General, M. Wilson, was sweating profusely. He had never seen James so stern. He clumsily tried to intervene. Mr. Anderson, we are deeply sorry, this must have been a misunderstanding. James raised a hand to interrupt him. No, Mr. Wilson. This is not a misunderstanding. It is a reflection. The reflection of a problem that is eating away at our institutions: racism, arrogance, and contempt for others. And this, in MY Hotel, will never have its place. The words sounded like hammer blows. He turned to the entire staff. You are here to serve, yes. But above all to respect. The Royal Palace is worthless if its marble columns rise on foundations of hatred. A murmur of approval rippled through the room. Several employees nodded, visibly touched by his words. James concludes sharply. Richard Doyle, your behavior is a disgrace to this establishment. As of today, you are dismissed. And I assure you, you will never represent this establishment again. Richard's face turned livid. He wanted to protest, but no words came out. The employee's stares weighed on him, a mixture of contempt and relief. James, without raising his voice, added calmly. Get out. Richard stood up, humiliated, and left the room under everyone's gaze. There was silence for a few seconds, then James continued in a softer tone. As for all of you, take this lesson to heart. The excellence of this palace is not measured only by its luxury, but by the way we treat each person. Remember that. The room erupted into spontaneous applause. Some employees had tears in their eyes. For them, this moment marked a turning point. The owner had just reminded them that true greatness lies in dignity and respect. The next morning, the city's newspapers all had the same headline on their front pages. Racism at the Royal Palace, Black owner humiliated by his own guard. The incident, filmed by several guests in the lobby, quickly circulated on social media. Within hours, the video had racked up millions of views. It showed Richard, the caretaker, hurling his racist insult, and then James Anderson, with impressive calm, revealing that he was the hotel's true owner. The reactions were explosive. Sir Twitter, le hashtag respect for Anderson was among the global trends. Thousands of messages praised his dignity and composure, while denouncing the latent racism in the most prestigious institutions. On television, debates erupted. Journalists, lawyers, and politicians discussed the case. Some emphasized the seriousness of the insult, others praised James's handling of the situation. Meanwhile, at the Royal Palace, the atmosphere was electric. Employees were torn between shame and admiration. Many said they were proud to have a boss who advocated human values, but also feared the consequences for the hotel's image. In his top-floor office, James watched the city through the bay window. His phone buzzed constantly, calls from journalists, invitations to conferences, offers of exclusive interviews. But for now, he refused to speak. His faithful friend and advisor, Michael Turner, entered the office, holding a stack of files under his arm. James, it's all the press is talking about. In less than 24 hours, you become a public figure against racism. You're going to have to respond, one way or another. James remained silent for a few moments, his gaze lost on the skyscrapers in the distance. Then he said calmly, "I didn't want to cause a scandal. I just wanted to remind people that human dignity is non-negotiable. But if this message can resonate beyond these walls, then I won't be silent." Michael nodded. "Civil rights groups want you to speak out. They think your story could make a difference." James turned around, his gaze determined. "So, let's hold a press conference. Not to talk about me, but to remind people that what happened at the Royal Palace happens every day elsewhere, to other men and women who don't have the voice or the means to defend themselves." Michael gave a smile. "I knew you'd say that." A few hours later, journalists were summoned to the hotel's grand salon. The world's cameras were focused on James Anderson, ready to deliver his message beyond the palace walls. The scandal was no longer just an internal affair. It was becoming a national symbol. The Royal Palace Hotel's grand reception room had been transformed into a veritable press room. Dozens of journalists, photographers, and cameramen crowded around, microphones at the ready, cameras trained on the stage, which was covered in a navy blue cloth adorned with the hotel's gold logo. The atmosphere was electric. The frantic clicking of cameras, the hurried whispers of reporters, and the constant buzz of live cameras could be heard. National networks like CNN, NBC, and even foreign media outlets were present. When James Anderson entered, dressed in a sober but elegant dark suit, the room rose almost as one. Some journalists even applauded him, an unusual gesture but indicative of the impact of his story. He took his place behind the lectern, adjusted the microphone slightly, and the room fell into absolute silence. His gaze, calm and profound, swept over the assembly before he spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am not here today to discuss business, nor to defend the reputation of my hotel. I am here to discuss a word. A word that was thrown at me yesterday, but which resonates in the lives of millions of men and women every day: dirty black." A murmur rippled through the room. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every detail of his expression. "When I was told this, it wasn't just a personal affront. It was a stark reminder that, even in the most prestigious places, racism still creeps in, like a shadow. But I didn't respond with anger. I responded with the truth. The truth is that this palace belongs to me. But at the end of the day, it's not about me. Because how many black men and women, every day, are humiliated, rejected, or discriminated against without having the means to respond? His tone, calm yet vibrant with emotion, captivated the entire room. Some journalists were already lowering their pens to simply listen to him, overwhelmed. I want this incident to serve as a lesson. Not just to the employee who insulted me. Not just to this hotel. But to every institution, every business, every individual. Respect is not a luxury. Dignity is not optional. It is the very foundation of our humanity. Thunderous applause erupted in the room, despite the usual rule of neutrality. Several journalists stood up, moved, applauding without restraint. James raised a hand to calm the room and concluded in a deep voice. I will continue to lead this hotel with the highest standards of excellence. But know this, true excellence is not measured by the crystal in the chandeliers or the marble in the columns. It is measured by how we treat each and every human being. And on that, I will never compromise. The room erupted in cheers. Cameras captured every moment, broadcasting his speech live across the country. On social media, his words went viral within minutes, shared by millions of people. James, however, remained dignified and calm, leaving the stage without triumph. It was not a personal victory he was seeking. It was a change of consciousness. And he had just planted the first seed. The very evening of the press conference, all the news channels were replaying James Anderson's words on a loop. His speech was already circulating on YouTube and TikTok, generating millions of views in just a few hours. Hashtags #AndersonSpeaks and #DigniteHumane dominated global trends. In homes, cafes, universities, and even in the offices of major corporations, people were talking about him. He was no longer just the discreet owner of a luxury palace. James Anderson had become a living symbol. Audience reactions. Social media was overflowing with messages. Finally, a man who tells the truth without hatred but with force. I have never seen anyone respond to racism with such dignity. Eternal respect. I will book my next night at the Royal Palace, just to support this man. In several cities, young demonstrators were already holding up placards repeating his words, dignity is not optional. Wealthy clients. At the Royal Palace itself, longtime regulars took a public stand. A famous Hollywood actor told the press, I've been staying at this hotel for 10 years. And I've never been prouder to return than now. James Anderson reminded the world that true luxury is respect. A Middle Eastern prince announced that he was reserving an entire floor for his next visit, adding, any man who can face racism with such calm deserves to be supported. Civic associations and movements. Civil rights leaders immediately contacted James, offering him opportunities to participate in international conferences, testify before government committees, and even write a book. During a phone call, the president of a large NGO told him, your voice is rare, Mr. Anderson. You have the stature of a leader and the wisdom of a man who knows the value of silence before speech. We want to walk with you. James, true to form, replied calmly, I am not a hero. I am simply a man who refuses to turn a blind eye to humiliation. If my story can help, then I will share it. But this fight must not be mine alone. And Richard? While the world was cheering James, former goalkeeper Richard Doyle was going through hell. Videos of him insulting James were playing on a loop. His name was circulating on social media, his photo was appearing in newspapers. He could no longer leave his house without encountering accusing looks. The insults he had hurled had backfired. His arrogance had crumbled, giving way to shame. But for James, this was not the time for revenge. He knew that what mattered now was to use this unexpected light to shine a light greater than himself. Because that wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a movement. The hotel lobby was silent. Guests and staff, still reeling from the scene with the guard, waited for an explanation. Jonathan, still standing in the center, scanned the room, his impressive calm contrasting with the panic evident on the guard's face. "I think it's time everyone knew the truth," Jonathan said in a firm but calm voice. He took a set of lavishly engraved keys from his jacket, then an official badge. Next to him, the establishment's general manager, alerted by the hubbub, arrived in a hurry. As soon as he saw Jonathan, he paled and bowed slightly. "Mr. Jonathan Williams, my apologies for this misunderstanding." The silence grew heavy. The customers began to exchange confused glances, some already understanding. Jonathan turned to the guard, trembling. "You wanted to send me back to the zoo? You should know that this dirty black man, as you call him, is actually the owner of this hotel." A general exclamation shook the hall. The guard felt his legs weaken. The customers, who had heard him insult Jonathan a few minutes earlier, stared at him in indignation. Jonathan continued, without raising his voice. "This hotel was born from my efforts, my sacrifices, and my work. I wanted to build a place where every guest, every employee, would be treated with dignity. But it seems that some still prefer to judge a man by the color of his skin rather than by his merit." The director, embarrassed, tried to calm the situation. "We will take the necessary measures immediately, Mr. Williams." Jonathan leva la main. "No. Everyone must see and hear. This is not a private matter. It is a lesson for everyone here." The guard, red with shame, stammered an apology, but it was too late. Customers had filmed the scene, and some were already streaming the video live. The image of a black owner humiliated by his own racist employee would soon be shared across the country. Jonathan, upright and dignified, concludes. "Respect is not demanded. It is imposed by the truth. Today, I am happy that this truth is revealed before you all." The lobby erupted in applause, some customers approaching to shake his hand, others congratulating him on his dignity. Meanwhile, the guard knew his career had just collapsed in a matter of seconds. The next morning, the hotel was hosting a major international conference. Journalists, investors, and public figures were in attendance. The lobby was buzzing with activity, cameras were being set up, and staff were busy welcoming guests. The guard, still on duty, glanced nervously at the crowd. Despite the shame he had felt the day before, he reassured himself that his actions had not had any important witnesses. But he had no idea that the event would bring him face to face with the truth. There was a great silence as the general manager introduced the guest of honor. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce the man who has made this hotel one of the most prestigious in the region. Our owner, Mr. Jonathan Williams." At that moment, the black man from the day before entered, dressed in a smart three-piece suit, walking with a quiet confidence. Cameras focused on him, reporters applauded, and guests rose to welcome him. The guard felt his heart stop. His legs trembled, his hands grew sweaty. His words from the day before echoed in his mind, "Dirty black man, go to the zoo." And now this humiliated, black, was none other than the owner of the hotel where he worked. Jonathan stopped in the middle of the hall and looked straight at the guard. Their eyes met. In front of everyone, he spoke in a calm but firm voice. "Yesterday, I was greeted by one of my own employees, not with respect, but with hatred and contempt. This man told me that I didn't belong here. Yet, I built this hotel with my own hands and my own efforts." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The guard lowered his head, unable to meet his boss's gaze. Jonathan concludes. "What I experienced yesterday was not a simple incident. It is a reflection of a deeper problem, racism, which continues to divide our societies. Today, I am not seeking revenge, but to show that dignity and justice always triumph in the end." Applause erupted throughout the hall. The guard, meanwhile, felt his career crumbling in front of the cameras. Days after the incident, the Royal Palace Hotel was a media sensation. Videos of James Anderson revealing his identity and denouncing racism had circulated across the country and generated a wave of admiration. Articles, television programs, and social media outlets presented him as a model of dignity and leadership. The hotel staff, scarred by the event, had changed profoundly. Employees now realized that respect was not an option, but a fundamental requirement of their work. Many expressed their gratitude for having a boss who led by example. As for Richard Doyle, the racist caretaker, his career was over. The hotel management had officially terminated his contract, and his behavior had been widely publicized. He was now a symbol of arrogance and intolerance, while James embodied courage and dignity. In his office, James watched the city through the bay window. Michael Turner, his trusted advisor, entered with a smile. "The conference, the media, the networks, you have become a real public figure." James smiled, humble but determined. "I'm not the hero. The real hero is the respect everyone deserves. What we've accomplished here must go far beyond this hotel. It's a message to everyone: human dignity is inviolable." Later that day, James made a symbolic gesture. He invited all the employees into the lobby for an internal ceremony. He addressed them. "What happened must never happen again. We are building a palace where every individual, regardless of their color, origin, or position, is treated with respect. We must be exemplary. It is our responsibility." The employees applauded fervently. The lesson was clear: arrogance and racism had no place, and dignity always triumphed. The Royal Palace then became more than just a luxury hotel. It became a symbol, an example of justice, respect, and humanity. James Anderson, through his self-control, calm and courage, had shown everyone that true power lies in dignity and integrity. And as the sun set over the city, the hall of the Royal Palace shone with a new light, that of respect restored and justice accomplished.